Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. I was 13 when my world turned upside down. My name's Camila, and 5 months before my mom got engaged to Oliver, my dad was convicted of manslaughter. It didn't make any sense. Dad wasn't a violent man, not ever. I was with him that night at the bar. He wasn't even drinking, just sitting there, talking to me about school while I sipped a soda. Then he got up to use the bathroom. He was gone maybe 10 minutes, and when he came back, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. His hands were shaking, and there was blood all over his shirt. "Call the police," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Someone, please, call them now." I just sat there, frozen, watching as people scrambled. The police showed up fast, their lights flashing through the bar's windows. I thought they'd ask him what happened, but they barely said a word. They just grabbed him, put him in handcuffs, and took him away. I kept calling out, "Dad, what's going on? Dad?" But he didn't answer. He just looked back at me, his eyes wide and scared. The next time I saw him, he was behind bars, wearing an orange jumpsuit, telling me over and over, "Camila, I didn't do it. I swear I didn't." I wanted to believe him, but everything was so confusing. And Mom, she changed after the conviction. It was like she couldn't wait to erase Dad from our lives. The day after the trial ended, she brought home Oliver. I came downstairs to find him sitting at our kitchen table, eating my dad's favorite cereal. Mom smiled at me, too brightly, and said, "Camila, this is Oliver. He's going to be your new dad. Your old one. Well, he's a monster. You need to stay away from him for your own safety." I just stared at her. "Dad's not a monster," I said, my voice shaking. "He said he didn't do it." She sighed, like I was being difficult. "Camila, you're too young to understand. He's a killer. You need to accept that." I didn't know what to think. I loved my dad, but Mom was so sure. And then, 5 months later, she dropped another bomb. I was doing homework in my room when she knocked on my door, Oliver standing behind her with that smug grin of his. "Camila, honey," she said, her voice all sugary, "Oliver and I are engaged. Isn't that wonderful? You can start calling him Daddy now." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Daddy?" I said. "He's not my dad." Oliver chuckled, stepping closer. "Come on, kiddo. Give me a chance. We're gonna be a family." I shook my head, backing away. "No, Dad's my dad. And he's not a killer." Mom's smile faded. "Camila, don't start this again. Oliver's good for us. You'll see." That's when I started to believe Dad was innocent. Mom was moving on too fast, like she'd been waiting for an excuse to replace him. And Oliver, he wasn't right. It started small. He'd stare at me during dinner, chewing slowly, his eyes lingering too long. One night, as I reached for the mashed potatoes, he said, "You're growing up so fast, Camila. Becoming such a pretty young woman." I froze, my stomach twisting. "Thanks," I mumbled, looking down at my plate. Mom beamed. "Isn't that sweet, Camila? He's so good with you." Sweet. It made my skin crawl. I tried to tell her how I felt. One night, when Oliver was out, I caught her in the kitchen. "Mom," I said, my voice low, "Oliver makes me uncomfortable. The way he looks at me, it's weird." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, Camila, don't be so dramatic. He's just being nice. You're lucky to have him." I wanted to scream, but I just nodded and went to my room. She must have told Oliver what I said, though, because that night, while Mom was asleep, he came into my room. I woke up to the creak of my door, and there he was, standing over me. Before I could say anything, he grabbed my wrist, hard. I gasped as his fingers dug into my skin. "You know what happens to naughty girls who snitch?" he hissed, his voice low and mean. His grip tightened, and I felt the bruises forming. I was too scared to move, too scared to breathe. When he finally let go and left, I curled up under my blankets, my heart pounding. I wanted to tell Mom, but after how she'd brushed me off before, I knew she wouldn't believe me. She'd probably say I was making it up, or worse, tell Oliver again. So I kept it a secret. Around that time, I began keeping a secret. I was writing letters to my dad, who was in prison. I'd hide them in my textbooks and mail them from a friend's house after school. Dad would reply through the prison email system to an account I'd set up without my mom knowing. Things took a dark turn one Thursday when I came home to discover my mom had changed my last name on all my school records to Oliver's, without telling me. "You'll thank me when you're older," she said. That night, Oliver came into my room to celebrate being a real family. He sat on my bed, put his hand on my thigh, and told me I should be grateful to have a dad who cared. I pushed him off and locked myself in the bathroom until he left. I wrote to my dad about what happened. The letter he sent back was on real paper, and parts of it were damp and transparent, as if he'd cried while writing it. That nearly broke me. The only thing that kept me going was the chance to see him. His birthday was approaching, and I eagerly asked my mom if I could visit. I pleaded, "I know you don't like him, but it's his birthday. Just today, for a few minutes. Please." But I was told no, and something even worse. Mom said we couldn't go because Oliver coincidentally had car show tickets that exact weekend and expected us all to go together. He even requested adjoining hotel rooms. When I said I'd rather visit my dad, my mom exploded, screaming, "He's a killer. You're not visiting a murderer." When I insisted he was innocent and still my dad, Oliver backhanded me across the face while my mom watched silently. I was forced to go with them that weekend. While I was sleeping, the worst happened. Oliver snuck into my room. He was drunk, and this time, he didn't stop at just a thigh grab. He tried to kiss me. I pushed him and ran to the bathroom again and locked myself. I had never felt so disgusted and humiliated. I came back from that car show weekend feeling like a ghost of myself. The trip with Mom and Oliver had shattered something inside me, and I could barely look at my own reflection. But things got even worse when we got home. That week, Mom found the letters I'd been hiding from Dad. I tucked them carefully between the pages of my textbooks, thinking they were safe. I was wrong. I came home from school one day to find her in the backyard, a fire pit blazing. My letters, every single one, were burning, curling into ash. "Camila," she snapped when she saw me standing there, my heart sinking. "You've been writing to that murderer behind my back." "He's not a murderer," I shouted, tears stinging my eyes. "He's my dad." She didn't even flinch. "You're grounded. And to make sure you don't pull this again, I'm taking your bedroom door off its hinges. We need to monitor you." I stared at her, my mouth open. "You're taking my door?" "Mom, that's not fair. It's for your own good," she said, turning back to the fire. "You need to let go of him." I wanted to scream, to tell her she was wrong, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. And then there was Oliver. He took Mom's monitoring as an invitation. Every night, I'd wake up to find him standing in my doorway, just watching me sleep. His silhouette against the hallway light made my stomach churn. I'd pull the blankets up to my chin, pretending to be asleep, but my heart would race until he finally walked away. It was like living in a cage with no way out. That was my breaking point. I couldn't take it anymore. The next day, I stayed late at school, sneaking into the library after hours. The computers were still on, and I logged into the secret email account I'd made to talk to Dad. My fingers flew across the keyboard, pouring out everything. Oliver's creepy stares, Mom burning my letters, the car show weekend, all of it. The email was a mess, an hour-long ramble that probably made no sense, but I didn't care. I just needed to get it out. I didn't even know what I wanted. Help, answers, anything, because I was so numb. 2 weeks later, I got a reply from Dad. It was long, so long I had to scroll for ages to read it all. He told me everything was going to be okay, that he loved me, that he was working on something to make things right. But one line stuck out. "Did you check where I said?" I frowned, confused, and went back through every email he'd ever sent me, scanning line by line. That's when I found it. In an email from right after I'd begged Mom to let me visit him for his birthday, he'd written, "Go to the attic, Camila, behind the radiator. There's something you need to see." I'd read that email before, but I must have been too upset to process it, too heartbroken from Mom's refusal to let me see him. I'd missed it completely. Now it was like a lifeline. I made a mental note, waiting for the perfect moment. That came the next week when Mom and Oliver went out for their date night. I was alone in the house, my hands shaking as I climbed the attic stairs with a flashlight. The air was dusty, and the floorboards creaked under my feet. I found the radiator in the corner, cold and rusted. My heart pounded as I reached behind it, my fingers brushing against something plastic. I pulled it out, a journal, wrapped tightly to keep it safe. I sat on the attic floor, my flashlight beam trembling as I opened to the page Dad had marked. It was dated weeks before his arrest, written in his familiar, slanted handwriting. "It's been a few weeks since I caught Grace and Oliver sneaking off into the bar," it read. "I don't know how to confront her." I froze, rereading the words. Mom and Oliver? Sneaking around before Dad was arrested? My mind raced, piecing things together, and that's when I heard it, the low rumble of a car pulling into the driveway. My blood ran cold. They were back early. The restaurant must have been too crowded, or maybe Mom and Oliver had a fight. I heard the car doors slamming outside, followed by the sharp click of Mom's heels on the walkway. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. I clutched Dad's journal tight against me, its leather cover cold under my shirt. I had only seconds to decide what to do. Oliver's heavy footsteps echoed on the stairs, each creak of the old wood sending a jolt through me. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the flashlight, its beam dancing wildly across the dusty attic floorboards. I scrambled toward the attic opening, but I was too slow. Oliver's head appeared through the hole just as I reached the ladder. His dark eyes locked onto mine, and for a long moment, he just stared, his expression unreadable in the dim light. My breath caught in my throat as he climbed the rest of the way up, his broad shoulders barely fitting through the opening. I backed up, my back hitting the rough wood of the attic wall, the journal pressing hard against my stomach under my shirt. He looked around slowly, deliberately, his gaze lingering on the disturbed dust hanging in the air like tiny ghosts. Then on the boxes I'd moved near the radiator where I'd found Dad's journal. "What are you doing up here, Camilla?" he asked, his voice calm, but with an edge that made my skin crawl. I was looking for my old stuffed animals," I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. "From when I was little." He didn't believe me. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands flexed at his sides. He stepped closer, and I caught the sharp smell of wine on his breath, mixed with that cologne Mom always said was expensive but made me feel sick. "You're a terrible liar," he said, his voice low and cutting. "Just like your father." The words hit me like a slap. Before I could move, he grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. I gasped, stumbling as he yanked me toward the ladder. I had to use my other hand to keep the journal from slipping out of my shirt, pressing it tight against my body. My legs felt like jelly as I climbed down, Oliver right behind me, his grip never loosening. Mom was waiting at the bottom of the ladder, her arms crossed, foot tapping impatiently. She looked annoyed, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Camilla, why are you sneaking around like some kind of thief in your own house?" she snapped. Oliver's hand tightened on my arm. "She's probably hiding something," he said, his voice dripping with accusation, his grip still possessive. Oliver's grip on my arm didn't loosen as he spoke, his eyes glinting with something dark. "We should search her room," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "She's hiding something, Grace." Panic surged through me, my heart racing as I pictured them, finding the journal still tucked under my shirt. "No," I blurted, the words tumbling out too fast, too desperate. "I was just looking for my old teddy bear. I can't sleep without my door. I just wanted something to hold on to." Mom rolled her eyes, her arms still crossed. "Camilla, really? You're too old for stuffed animals," she said, sounding exhausted. "Go to bed. I'm too tired for this nonsense." I held my breath, waiting for Oliver to push harder, but he just stared at me, his fingers finally loosening. I yanked my arm free and hurried to my room, feeling his eyes boring into my back. That night, I lay awake, listening to the house settle into its nighttime creaks and groans. When I heard Oliver's deep, rumbling snores mixing with Mom's softer breathing, I carefully pulled the journal from under my shirt. My hands shook as I slipped it inside my pillowcase, the leather corners digging into my cheek when I lay down. I couldn't risk reading more, not with Oliver checking on me every hour. His shadow appeared in my doorway like clockwork, looming silently before moving on. Each time, my stomach twisted, and I held my breath until he was gone. The next morning was Saturday, and Mom acted like nothing had happened. She was in the kitchen, humming off-key to some song on the radio, flipping pancakes like we were a normal family. The normalcy of it made my stomach turn. Oliver sat across from me at the table, his eyes following every movement as I pushed food around my plate, barely eating. "I'm going to the bathroom," I mumbled, standing up quickly. I grabbed my backpack, where I'd stashed the journal, and locked the bathroom door behind me. My heart pounded as I pulled out a plastic bag from under the sink and wrapped the journal in it. The toilet tank's water was cold on my arms as I carefully placed it inside, securing the lid back in place. It wasn't safe, but it was the best I could do. On Monday, I snuck into the school's computer lab during lunch, telling my friends I had to finish an assignment. The room was empty, just the hum of old computers and the tick of the wall clock. I pulled the journal from my bag, my hands still shaking as I started taking photos of each page with my phone. The fluorescent lights glared off the pages, making some photos blurry, but I kept going. Dad's handwriting filled the entries, some dating back years. As time went on, his words grew more frantic. He wrote about seeing Oliver's car parked down the street at weird hours, about Mom acting strange and distant. One entry mentioned finding a receipt for a motel in Mom's purse when he was looking for gum. Another described Oliver showing up at the bar during Dad's shifts, always watching from a corner booth, always lurking like a predator studying its prey. My heart pounded as I uploaded the journal photos to a cloud account I'd made with a fake name, watching the progress bar creep forward on the school computer. Once it finished, I deleted the photos from my phone, checking twice to make sure they were gone. Oliver had been going through my things more lately, and I knew he'd check my phone if he got the chance. When I got home that day, my stomach dropped. Oliver was in my room, sitting on my bed like he owned it. My drawers were dumped out, clothes scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. My mattress was flipped, the box spring exposed, and even my old jewelry box was emptied, cheap necklaces and friendship bracelets tangled together. "Where is it?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I played dumb, forcing my face into a confused frown. What are you talking about? He stood up, towering over me, and grabbed my shoulders, shaking me so hard my teeth clicked together. Don't lie to me, Camila. I know you found something in the attic. I'm not stupid. I froze, my mind racing. But before I could answer, I heard Mom's keys jingling as she walked in. Hello? She called out, her voice cheerful. She appeared in the doorway, her eyebrows shooting up as she surveyed the mess. What's going on here? Oliver's grip on me vanished, his entire demeanor shifting in an instant. He flashed that fake smile that never reached his eyes. Just helping Camila reorganize her messy room, he said smoothly. She asked for my help, didn't you, kiddo? I swallowed hard, nodding because I had no choice. Mom sighed, like it was just another inconvenience. Well, clean it up before dinner, she said, walking away. She believed him, like always, probably because it was easier than asking questions. That night at dinner, Oliver dropped a bomb. We're moving up the wedding, he announced, his fork poised over his plate. Instead of next year, it's happening next month. I can't wait any longer to make our family official. Mom squealed with excitement, clapping her hands like a child. Oh, Oliver, that's wonderful. She gushed, leaning over to kiss him. I felt sick, the chicken on my plate suddenly looking gray and unappetizing. I pushed my food around, trying not to meet Oliver's gaze. Over the next few weeks, he watched me constantly. He installed a camera in the hallway, its red light blinking at where my door used to be, staring at me like an evil eye. He started driving me to and from school, no more bus rides with my friends. He'd wait in the parking lot, engine running, watching everyone who talked to me. At night, he took my phone, placing it on his nightstand where I couldn't reach it. But I kept working in secret. During the day at school, I printed pages from the journal and hid them in my locker, taping them behind old textbooks. I needed help but didn't know who to trust. My teachers seemed oblivious, my friends wouldn't understand. Then I remembered Uncle Sebastian. He was Dad's best friend since high school, the kind of guy who showed up to help without being asked. They'd been inseparable until Dad's arrest. Mom had banned Uncle Sebastian from contacting us after Dad's arrest, saying he was a bad influence, that he enabled Dad's so-called violent tendencies. But I knew that was a lie. Uncle Sebastian was a good man, always smelling like sawdust and carrying butterscotch candies in his pocket. He worked construction and had 3 kids of his own, twin boys, and a little girl who called me her big cousin. I found his number in an old address book Mom had forgotten about in the kitchen junk drawer, buried under expired coupons and dead batteries. During PE class, I clutched my stomach and told the teacher I felt sick and needed air. She waved me off, and I slipped out to the pay phone outside school, the metal cold against my ear. Uncle Sebastian answered on the 3rd ring, his gruff voice softening when I said, "It's Camila." "Camila? Kiddo, is that you?" he said, sounding surprised but warm. "Yeah, it's me," I said, my words tumbling over each other. "I need help, Uncle Sebastian. Dad's innocent. I have proof, his journal. It says things about Mom and Oliver. Please, I don't know what to do." "Slow down. Camila, breathe," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "Proof? What kind of proof?" "I found his journal. It's got stuff about Mom and Oliver before Dad got arrested. I took pictures." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Meet me at the public library after school tomorrow. I'll tell your mom I saw you walking and offered a ride if she asks." Okay, I whispered, feeling a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. Oliver was suspicious when I told him I was staying late for a group project. He grilled me, his eyes narrowing. "Who's in your group, Camila? What's the project about? Which teacher assigned it?" "It's a history project with Sarah and Jake," I lied, keeping my voice even. "Mrs. Carter assigned it." He called the school to check, and Mrs. Carter backed me up, probably annoyed at being bothered during her planning period. I could hear her sharp tone through the phone when he hung up, satisfied but still watching me like a hawk. The next day, I practically ran to the library, my backpack bouncing against my spine. Uncle Sebastian was waiting in the parking lot in his old pickup truck, the red paint faded but clean. He looked older than I remembered, with more gray in his beard and deeper lines around his eyes. I climbed into the truck and pulled out my phone, swiping through the photos of Dad's journal entries. "Here," I said, handing it to him. "Look at these." His face got darker with each one, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the steering wheel. "I always knew something was off about your dad's arrest," he said, his voice low. "The story never made sense. Too many holes, too convenient. Do you think it's enough?" I asked, my voice shaking. "The journal, I mean. I hid it in the toilet tank at home, wrapped in plastic." He nodded, a small smile breaking through. "Smart girl. But we need more than just your dad's suspicions. We need real evidence. Witnesses, something concrete." He paused, staring out the windshield. "I know some people who worked at the bar that night. Maybe they saw something, remembered something the police didn't bother to ask. Over the next 2 weeks, I met Uncle Sebastian at the library 3 more times. Each meeting felt like something out of a spy movie. I kept checking over my shoulder, taking different routes to avoid Oliver's watchful eyes. Uncle Sebastian had been busy. He tracked down Edward, who was working security at the bar the night Dad was arrested. Edward was a big guy with kind eyes, the kind that made you feel safe. He remembered everything. Oliver was there that night, Edward told us, his voice low as we sat in a quiet corner of the library. Which was weird, 'cause he told the police he was home watching TV. I saw him go into the bathroom right before your dad, Camila. Maybe 30 seconds earlier. Why didn't you say anything? I asked, my voice shaking with frustration. He looked down, rubbing the back of his neck. They arrested your dad so fast. I was scared to get involved. Oliver, he's got connections everywhere. I didn't want trouble. Uncle Sebastian nodded, his face grim. What else do you remember? Edward hesitated, then said, Oliver came out quick, looked calm. Your dad came out a minute later, covered in blood, yelling for help. Uncle Sebastian also found Elizabeth, who was bartending that night. She had curly red hair and a sharp memory for faces. We met her at the library, too, her hands fidgeting as she talked. Oliver had been coming around for weeks before it happened, she said. Always asking about your dad's schedule, acting friendly. I thought it was strange, but people ask about regulars all the time. That night, he ordered a whiskey neat, then disappeared for a bit before the body was found. You're the one who called 911, right? I asked, remembering what Dad had told me. She nodded, her eyes distant. Yeah, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely dial. The breakthrough came when Uncle Sebastian talked to Brian, the bar manager who'd run the place for 20 years. We met at Brian's house, his living room thick with the smell of cigarettes and coffee. My stomach was in knots as he told us about the bar's security system. We upgraded it a month before the incident, Brian said, pulling an old hard drive from a box in his office. The police only took the main camera footage. They didn't know about the backup system for the hallway to the bathrooms. I forgot about it myself until you asked, Sebastian. Been gathering dust behind old liquor invoices. We crowded around his laptop as he connected the drive. The footage was grainy but clear enough. The timestamp showed Oliver entering the bathroom at 9:47 p.m., walking casually, like he had all the time in the world. Dad went in at 9:52 p.m., probably just needing to use the bathroom after his shift. Oliver came out at 9:51 p.m., checking his watch and smoothing down his shirt. Dad came out at 9:53 p.m., covered in blood, shouting for help, his face a mask of shock and horror. It was clear as day. Oliver had 4 minutes alone in that bathroom, more than enough time to call someone and set up a frame job. Uncle Sebastian didn't say a word as he copied the footage onto multiple USB drives, his hands steady and methodical. Uncle Sebastian's hands were steady as he handed me one of the USB drives with the footage. We need to be careful, Camila, he said, his voice low and serious. We can't just go to the police. Oliver might have connections there, friends who owe him favors. We need an airtight case first. What do I do at home? I asked. Act normal, he said, his eyes locking onto mine. Don't let on that we know anything. Not a word, not a look. Can you do that? I nodded, but it felt like the hardest thing I'd ever had to do. Oliver must have sensed something, though. Maybe I was a bad actress. Or maybe he was just paranoid. He started getting more aggressive. One night, he came into my room and sat on my bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. The hallway camera couldn't see him from that angle. I froze, my heart hammering as he leaned closer, his voice low and menacing. I know you've been sneaking around with Sebastian, he said, his eyes boring into me. Someone saw you at the library. One of my buddies. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but my hands were shaking under the blanket. He smirked, but it wasn't friendly. If you don't stop whatever you're doing, your mom might get hurt. Accidents happen all the time, Camila. People fall downstairs. Cars have brake problems. Gas leaks happen. The threat settled in my chest like a cold stone. I understood exactly what he meant, and it terrified me. I forced myself to keep my breathing even, to not let him see how scared I was. The next day, I met Uncle Sebastian at the library, whispering even though we were alone in a corner. Oliver knows we've been meeting, I told him, my voice trembling. He said something about Mom getting hurt. Like it was nothing. Uncle Sebastian's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. We need to move faster. I've been talking to your dad's lawyer, showed him the footage and the journal photos. He's excited but cautious. He says we need the original journal, too. It'll strengthen the case, prove the photos aren't doctored. I'll get it, I said, even though the thought made me want to throw up. That night, I waited until 3 a.m., watching the red numbers on my clock change with agonizing slowness. When I was sure Oliver and Mom were asleep, I crept to the bathroom, my bare feet silent on the carpet. My hands shook as I lifted the toilet tank lid and retrieved the journal, still dry in its plastic wrapping. Dad's words safe inside. I slipped it into my backpack for school, zipping it into the inner pocket, my heart pounding so loud I was sure it would wake the house. But when I stepped out of the bathroom, Oliver was standing in the hallway like a ghost. Oliver's eyes glinted in the darkness as he blocked the hallway. "What are you doing up, Camila?" he asked, his voice low and suspicious. I clutched my stomach, forcing a grimace. I felt sick. I mumbled, praying he'd believe me. He stared at me for a long moment, his gaze heavy, then stepped aside. I hurried to my room, feeling his eyes burning into my back the whole way. The next morning, my heart sank when I realized my backpack was gone. I found it in the kitchen, empty, its contents spread across the table like a crime scene. Oliver was sitting there, Dad's journal in front of him, flipping through the pages with theatrical interest. Mom stood beside him, reading over his shoulder, her face pale and confused. "What is this, Camila?" Mom asked, her voice sharp as she held up a page. Before I could answer, Oliver cut in, his tone smooth and pitying. "She's been writing fantasy stories about me, Grace. It's disturbing. She needs help." He pointed to an entry, his finger jabbing the page. "Look at this. See how she's trying to copy your husband's handwriting? And here, she mentions you and me together. It's clearly her sick fantasy about breaking us up." Mom's confusion turned to anger as Oliver kept talking, weaving lies with just enough truth to make them believable. "Camila, I'm so disappointed in you," she said, her voice shaking. "Making up lies about Oliver is sick. I thought you were dealing with your dad's absence better than this." "It's Dad's journal." I cried, my voice breaking. "I didn't write it. It's his handwriting, Mom, please." She shook her head, her eyes hard. "You're forging his handwriting to frame Oliver because you can't accept him as your new father. This has to stop." Oliver leaned back, his smile cold. "She needs therapy, Grace. Maybe even a special boarding school for troubled teens. My cousin runs one in another state, very strict, very isolated. Good for fixing problem children who tell lies and cause trouble." The way he said it made my blood run cold. I felt the walls closing in, the room spinning slightly. At school, I couldn't focus. During lunch, I spotted Uncle Sebastian's truck in the parking lot and ran to it, climbing in and breaking down in tears. "They found the journal," I sobbed. "Oliver's saying I wrote it, that it's all fake. Mom believes him. They're talking about sending me away." Uncle Sebastian's face hardened, but his voice was calm. "Don't worry, kiddo. We still have the footage. That's solid." But when I got home that afternoon, my phone was missing from my backpack. Oliver had it. He'd gone through everything and found my cloud account, guessing the password after 3 tries. He made me watch as he deleted all the journal photos, his fingers stabbing the screen with vicious satisfaction. "Sebastian's copies won't matter without the original to verify them against," he said, his voice smug. "Photos can be faked. Any decent lawyer would argue they're doctored without the original journal to compare the handwriting. The bar footage? That's different. Official security system, verified timestamps. But handwriting and photos? Too easy to forge." That night, Mom sat me down, her face set in that way that meant no arguing. "You're leaving for boarding school on Monday, Camila," she said, her voice cold. "This special place will help you deal with your delusions about Oliver. I've already called the school. They're expecting you." "Where is it?" I asked, my throat tight. "In the mountains, 1,000 miles away," she said. "No phones allowed, no outside contact for the first 6 months to avoid negative influences." My heart sank. This was Oliver's plan, to shut me up for good, to make me disappear without actually killing me. I had to act fast. Saturday morning, when Mom went grocery shopping and I heard the shower running with Oliver inside, I saw my chance. I eased open the front door, the sound of water muffling my footsteps, and ran to Ashley's house. Her mom was at work, and Ashley covered for me, bless her. I used her phone to call Uncle Sebastian, my words spilling out in a rush. "They're sending me to boarding school on Monday," I said, my voice shaking. "Some place in the mountains, no contact for 6 months. It's Oliver's idea, I know it." Uncle Sebastian's voice was steady but urgent. "Pack a bag, Camila. Meet me at the library in an hour." I hurried back home, my heart pounding, but Oliver was waiting on the front steps, his hair still damp from the shower. His eyes narrowed as he saw me. "Where were you?" he growled, grabbing me by the hair. My scalp burned as he dragged me inside. Mom wasn't back yet. He threw me against the wall, hard enough to knock a picture frame to the floor with a crash. "You've ruined everything," he snarled, looming over me. "I've worked too hard to let a bratty kid destroy my plans." "What plans?" I said, my voice trembling but defiant. "Why did you do it, Oliver? Why did you call that man in the bathroom?" He laughed, an ugly, bitter sound. "Your dad deserved to rot in prison. I'd been planning this for months before that night at the bar. Your mom was so easy to manipulate, so desperate for attention after your dad started working 2 jobs to pay off the mortgage. Why the man in the bathroom? I pressed, needing to hear him say it. Oliver's eyes gleamed with a sick kind of pride. Wrong place, wrong time. I went in there to plant a bloody knife. One with your dad's prints from your kitchen. But that hammered guy saw me placing it near the sink, started asking questions, getting too close. So I silenced him, quick and messy, with that same knife. Then your dad came in minutes later, trying to help. It was perfect. The blood was fresh, got all over him when he tried to stop the bleeding. In the chaos, I pocketed the murder weapon and left a different knife at the scene, one I'd prepared that wouldn't trace back to me. My heart raced as he spoke, but I stayed still, Ashley's phone secretly recording everything from where I'd hidden it in my pocket. I'd pressed the record button on Ashley's phone before I even walked into the house, slipping it into my pocket as Oliver ranted, oblivious. He was too caught up in his own smugness, bragging about how smart he'd been. I wore gloves. Camila, he sneered, pacing the living room. Studied the bar schedule for weeks. After your dad was gone, marrying your mom was just smart business. She's got good life insurance from that hospital job. And you'd be worth even more in Social Security if something happened to her. Maybe a car accident, maybe a fall, maybe she'd just get sad and take too many pills. The front door creaked open, and Mom walked in, her face going white as paper when she heard him. She'd come back early, forgotten her wallet, and now groceries slipped from her hands, oranges rolling across the floor. Oliver spun around, realizing his mistake. "Grace, I didn't mean it," he said quickly, his voice smooth but panicked. "She made me angry, saying all those lies about me. I was just trying to scare her straight." Mom backed away, her hand reaching behind her to the kitchen counter. "Get out," she said, her voice trembling but firm. He stepped toward her, his smile forced. "You're overreacting, Grace. Come on, let's talk." She grabbed a kitchen knife from the block, holding it steady. "Leave, Oliver, or I'll call the police." He laughed, but it was hollow. "You wouldn't dare. Too much scandal, too much shame. What would the neighbors think?" Her hand didn't waver, and for the first time in months, I saw the mom I used to know, the one who protected me from nightmares and kissed scraped knees. Oliver's face changed, the mask finally dropping completely. He grabbed his keys and wallet from the counter, but before storming out, he turned to her. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and venomous. "I know too much about you, Grace. Your affairs before your husband, when you two were first married. The money you stole from his savings to cover your shopping debts. Go to the police, and I'll destroy your reputation." He slammed the door so hard the windows shook, and the last pictures on the walls crashed to the floor. Mom collapsed, her body shaking with sobs. I knelt beside her, pulling out Ashley's phone and playing the recording of Oliver's confession. Her face crumpled more with each word, his voice echoing in the quiet kitchen. "I'm so sorry, Camila," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I've been so stupid. I failed you and your dad. We need to call the police now," I said, my voice urgent. "We have his confession." She shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. "His threats, what he said about me. I could lose everything." I grabbed her hand. "Mom, we can't let him win. I'm calling Uncle Sebastian." He was there within minutes, a USB drive with the bar footage in his hand. We sat Mom down at the kitchen table, and I showed her everything. The journal entry screenshots I'd saved, the security footage showing Oliver's movements, the witness statements Uncle Sebastian had collected and had notarized. Mom threw up in the kitchen sink when the reality hit her. She'd been sleeping next to the enemy for months, planning a wedding with him. Her hands shook as she wiped her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "We have to call the police," she said. "Now." I nodded, relief flooding me as she finally agreed. 2 detectives arrived within the hour, professional but kind. One offered Mom a box of tissues, while the other spoke to me gently, like I was fragile but not broken. "Let's hear what you've got, Camila," he said, his notebook ready. We played the recording of Oliver's confession on Ashley's phone, and they listened to it multiple times, their faces growing grimmer with each replay. Then we showed them the bar footage on our laptop, Uncle Sebastian pointing out the timestamps as Oliver entered and exited the bathroom. The detectives took Dad's journal as evidence, handling it carefully with gloved hands. One of them, Detective Larson, looked at me with a steady gaze. "We've had doubts about your dad's case from the start," he said. "The forensics never quite added up, but there was intense pressure to close it fast. This confession, it fills in all the gaps. They put out an arrest warrant for Oliver that night, but he disappeared. His apartment was empty, cleaned out in a hurry, his car gone. Don't worry, Detective Larson told us as they left. We'll find him." They stationed a patrol car outside our house, just in case. Mom and I didn't sleep that night. We pushed the couch against the front door and sat in the living room with all the lights on, jumping at every creak and shadow. The next morning, Uncle Sebastian called. My construction buddy saw Oliver at a motel 2 towns over, he said, his voice urgent. Tried to pay cash for a room. Police are on their way. By noon, they had him in custody. He tried to run, but didn't get far. They found a lockbox in his trunk with the real murder weapon, the knife he'd used, not the decoy from the crime scene. It still had traces of the victim's blood in the handle's crevices, like some sick trophy he'd kept all these years. Oliver tried to deny everything at first. She faked that recording with AI, he told the police, pointing at me. Her mom's lying to protect her because she feels guilty about her husband. But the evidence was overwhelming. The bar footage showed him entering the bathroom. His fingerprints were on the real murder weapon once they tested it properly, and the forensics that never matched Dad's suddenly made perfect sense when applied to Oliver. Even the angle of the wounds matched Oliver's height, not Dad's. Faced with it all, Oliver finally broke. He took a plea deal and confessed fully, admitting to planning the frame job, manipulating Mom, and even to things we hadn't known about. Other crimes in other states, other victims who'd been blamed for things they didn't do. Detective Larson told us Oliver was a serial predator, slipping through the cracks for years, moving from town to town, preying on vulnerable women with kids. Dad's lawyer didn't waste time. He filed an emergency appeal, piling on the new evidence, the recording, the bar footage, the real murder weapon, the witness statements. The judge reviewed it all and ordered Dad's immediate release. After 8 months in prison for a crime he didn't commit, Dad was coming home. Mom and I drove to pick him up, the car silent except for the soft hum of the radio. Mom kept crying, dabbing her eyes with crumpled tissues, her hands trembling on the wheel. I didn't know what to say, my throat so tight it hurt to swallow. When the prison gates creaked open and Dad walked out, he looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner, older, his hair more gray than brown. But when his eyes found me, they lit up, and I ran to him, hugging him tighter than I'd ever hugged anyone. He smelled different, like industrial soap and sadness, but he was still my dad. He held me close, crying into my hair. I missed you so much, Camila, he whispered, his voice breaking. I never stopped believing you'd know the truth. Mom stood back, wringing her hands, unsure. Dad looked at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. We'll talk later, Grace, he said quietly. Right now, I just want to go home. The drive back was quiet, except for Dad asking small questions to fill the silence. How's school going, Camila? He asked, glancing at me in the back seat. You grown taller since I last saw you? Is that little diner on Main Street still open? Yeah, it's still there, I said, forcing a smile. His normal dad questions felt anything but normal after everything we'd been through. When we got home, Dad paused in the doorway, just standing there, taking it all in like he was memorizing the place. The house looked strange without Oliver's stuff. Mom had thrown out anything he'd touched, leaving weird empty spaces on shelves and walls. Dad walked through each room slowly, his fingers brushing over furniture, picking up picture frames Mom hadn't replaced yet. That first night was awkward as hell. Dad slept on the couch, even though Mom offered him their old bedroom. I heard him moving around at 3 a.m., probably unable to sleep after months in a cell. I found him in the kitchen, making coffee with shaking hands. We sat at the table in silence until he finally looked at me, his eyes heavy. Are you okay, Camila? Really okay? I took a deep breath and told him everything. About Oliver, his threats, the way he'd watched me, the boarding school plan, all of it. Dad listened, his jaw getting tighter with each detail, his hands clenching around his mug. When I finished, he reached across the table, his voice thick. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. It wasn't your fault, Dad. Show and sidebar. The next few days were a blur of lawyers and paperwork. Dad's lawyer was pushing to get his record completely cleared, not just overturned. There was talk of compensation for wrongful imprisonment, but Dad brushed it off. I don't care about the money, Camila, he told me one evening, his voice tired but firm. I just want my life back. Mom kept trying to talk to him, trailing him around the house like a shadow. Can we just sit down, please? She'd say, her voice pleading as she followed him to the kitchen. Later, he'd reply, one word, before finding an excuse to leave the room. I could see it hurt her, but I didn't feel sorry. She'd betrayed him in the worst way possible, even if Oliver had manipulated her. Oliver's trial was set for 6 months out. The prosecutor called us to explain. With his confession and all the evidence you and your uncle gathered, he's looking at life without parole, she said. We've linked him to 3 other murders in different states, same pattern. He'd frame someone close to the victim, then swoop in to comfort the grieving family. Detective Larson stopped by later that week, his face grim but kind. You're lucky, Camila, he said. His other victims didn't survive to expose him. I went back to school, but everything felt off. Kids whispered when I passed in the halls, their eyes darting away when I looked at them. Everyone knew about Oliver and Dad by now. The story had spread like wildfire. Ashley stuck by me, though, and a few other friends who actually mattered. My teachers were extra nice, offering me extensions on assignments and soft smiles, which almost made it worse. I'm fine, I told my history teacher when she asked how I was holding up. I didn't want pity. I just wanted normal, but normal was gone, probably forever. Dad started working construction with Uncle Sebastian. Manual labor clears my head, he told me one night, brushing dust off his jeans as he came home exhausted. He was calmer, though, more like himself. He'd started seeing a therapist, some guy who specialized in wrongful conviction trauma. He didn't talk about the sessions, but I could tell they helped. He stopped flinching when doors slammed, stopped checking the locks obsessively. Mom moved out after 2 weeks. She rented a small apartment across town, saying she needed space to figure things out. I just need some time, Camila, she said, her eyes red from crying. You can stay with me sometimes, if you want. No, I said, shaking my head. I need to be with Dad. I was relieved, honestly. The tension when she and Dad were in the same room was suffocating. Some things you can't come back from. The divorce papers came a month later. Dad signed them without even reading, just wanting it over. Mom gave him everything. The house, the car, full custody of me. Her guilt was eating her alive. She'd started seeing a therapist, too, trying to understand how she'd been so blind. Sometimes I felt bad for Mom, but then I'd remember how she chose Oliver over Dad, how she didn't believe me when I told her about him, and the sympathy would dry up like a puddle in the sun. Uncle Sebastian became a regular at our house, showing up with his kids on weekends for cookouts, just like the old days. His twins, Elijah and John, were only 8, but they idolized Dad, not caring about his past, only that he could throw a football and tell funny stories. Show us that spiral again, Uncle Mike. They'd beg, and Dad would grin, tossing the ball in a perfect arc. Deborah, Uncle Sebastian's daughter, was my age, and we got close fast. She understood what it was like to have your family turned upside down. Her mom had left when she was 10. It's like the ground just disappears, she told me one night as we sat on the porch, and I nodded, knowing exactly what she meant. 3 months after Dad got out, I had to testify at a pretrial hearing. The prosecutor pulled me aside beforehand. Your testimony is key, Camila, she said gently. It'll make sure Oliver can't claim insanity or coercion. You ready? I think so, I said, my voice small, but I wasn't sure at all. I wore my nicest dress, the blue one Dad bought me for my birthday 2 years ago, though it was a little tight now. My hands shook as I swore to tell the truth, the courtroom air heavy with the smell of polished wood and tension. Oliver sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, looking smaller than I remembered, almost pathetic. He tried to catch my eye, but I stared straight ahead, focusing on the prosecutor's calm face. I told them everything, Oliver's threats, the way he touched me, the night at the hotel during the car show weekend. When I got to finding Dad's journal, my voice broke, and tears streamed down my face. The judge called a recess because I was crying too hard to continue. Dad wasn't allowed in the courtroom since he might be called as a witness later, but Uncle Sebastian was there in the gallery. He caught my eye during the recess and gave me a thumbs up, mouthing, "You're brave, kiddo." It helped, knowing he was there, believing in me. When the hearing resumed, Oliver's lawyer tried to trip me up, his voice dripping with fake concern. Camila, isn't it possible you misunderstood Mr. Oliver's intentions? You were young, upset about your father. Maybe you saw things that weren't there? I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. No, I know what happened. He threatened me. He touched me. He admitted to framing my dad. I didn't misunderstand anything. The prosecutor played the recording from Ashley's phone, and Oliver's face went gray as his own voice filled the room, confessing everything. His lawyer leaned over, whispering frantically, and that afternoon, they asked for a plea deal, 25 years to life instead of life without parole. The prosecutor shut it down. No way, she said, her voice firm. Not with this evidence. After the hearing, reporters swarmed us outside the courthouse, shouting questions as we pushed toward Uncle Sebastian's truck. Camila, do you forgive your stepfather? One yelled. How does it feel to see him in chains? Dad shielded me with his body, his arm around my shoulders, and we didn't answer. There was nothing to say that would make them understand. This wasn't entertainment, it was our life. Mom started sending me letters, long, rambling apologies about how she failed as a mother, how she should have seen Oliver's signs. I read the first few, my stomach twisting, then started throwing them away unopened. One night, Dad noticed me tossing one in the trash. You should consider forgiving her someday, Camila, he said softly. Not for her, for your own peace. I shook my head, my jaw tight. I'm not ready, Dad. Maybe I'll never be ready. Mom had chosen a monster over her own family, and some things are unforgivable. Oliver's trial was brutal. The prosecution brought in families of his other victims, laying out pattern after pattern of his sick behavior. A woman from Arizona took the stand, her voice steady but haunted. She'd dated Oliver after her husband died in a suspicious accident. I got bad vibes, she said. Dumped him after a month. Probably saved my life. Another family from Nevada spoke about their son, serving time for a murder that sounded eerily like Dad's case. Same setup, same frame job. The prosecutor turned to the jury. We're reopening that case, too, she said, her voice firm. On day 3, Dad testified, wearing his only suit, the one from his wedding to Mom that he'd kept for some reason. He looked nervous but determined as he described finding the body in the bar bathroom. I tried to help, he said, his voice low, pressed my hands on the wound, but there was so much blood. Then the police came, and they just arrested me. I didn't understand why. He talked about prison, missing my birthday, writing letters I'd never get to read. When he spoke about the day I was born, his voice broke. I promised to always protect her, he said, glancing at me in the gallery. And I felt like I'd failed. Oliver took the stand on day 5, against his lawyer's advice. He tried to play the victim, claiming the man in the bathroom attacked him first. I was defending myself, he said, his voice calm but rehearsed. Under cross-examination, the prosecutor tore him apart. So, you're saying you acted in self-defense, but you planted a knife with another man's prints? She pressed. Oliver fumbled, contradicted himself, his anger flaring as he snapped at her. When she asked about his plans for me and Mom, he went silent, refusing to answer. Even his own lawyer looked defeated, rubbing his temples. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty on all counts: murder, conspiracy, fraud, attempted assault on a minor, the list went on. The judge sentenced him to life without parole, consecutive sentences for each crime. Oliver didn't react, just stared at the table. As they let him out in chains, he looked at me one last time. I stared back, my chin up, wanting him to see he hadn't broken me, that I'd won. Dad and I went to his favorite restaurant after, the little Mexican place on Main Street that still had his picture on the wall from when he was a regular. The owner, Mr. Garcia, rushed over and hugged him. Mike, this meal's on the house, he said, clapping Dad on the back. We ate in comfortable silence, both exhausted but relieved. It was over. Really over. Oliver would die in prison, and we could start rebuilding. The next week, Mom tried to come to the house. Dad wouldn't let her in, talking to her through the screen door. Grace, you can't be here, he said, his voice flat but resolute. Please, Mike, she begged, tears streaming down her face. I want to apologize, try family counseling. We can fix this. No, Dad said. That ship has sailed. You need to move on, and so do we. She cried harder, begging, but Dad didn't budge. I watched from the stairs, feeling nothing. She'd made her choice, and now she had to live with it. I started seeing a therapist, a woman named Dr. Cheryl who specialized in trauma. She had a kind voice and a knack for asking questions that made me think. In our first session, she leaned forward and said, Camila, you've been through more than most adults could handle. Do you realize how strong you've been? I shrugged, staring at my hands. I just did what I had to do. She smiled softly. No, you did more than that. You fought for your dad, for the truth, when no one else would. That's not just strength, that's courage. You've been incredibly brave. Some days, I believed Dr. Cheryl when she called me brave, other days, I didn't. But slowly, the nightmares faded. I stopped checking locks obsessively, stopped flinching when men walked behind me in the grocery store. Progress came in small steps, like waking up without that knot in my chest. Dad and I built new routines to fill the empty spaces Oliver left behind. Sunday breakfasts at the diner, where we'd split a stack of pancakes and argue over who got the last piece of bacon. Wednesday movie nights, curled up on the couch with popcorn, laughing at cheesy action flicks. Saturdays, we'd help Uncle Sebastian with his construction projects, me handing Dad tools while he teased me about my terrible aim with a hammer. We talked more than we ever had, about school, my friends, what I wanted for the future. You thinking college yet? He asked one night, squinting at my algebra homework like it was a foreign language. Maybe, I said, grinning. But you're no help with this math, Dad. He laughed, ruffling my hair. Fair enough. But I'm here for the important stuff. He came to every school event, cheering way too loud at my mediocre clarinet performances in the school band. That's my girl. He'd yell, embarrassing me, but making me smile. We were learning how to be a family again, just the two of us. 6 months after the trial, Dad started hanging out with Elizabeth, the bartender who'd testified about Oliver. At first, she was just a friend, stopping by with coffee and stories about the bar. Then it turned into something more. She made Dad laugh. Real laughs, not the forced ones he'd been faking. I liked her. She didn't try to be my mom, just treated me like a person. She'd bring takeout, and we'd watch bad movies, poking fun at the plot holes. How is that guy still alive after falling off a cliff? She'd say, tossing popcorn at the screen, and Dad would crack up, his eyes brighter than I'd seen in years. Mom stopped trying to contact us. Ashley's mom told me she'd moved to another state, starting fresh where nobody knew her story. Part of me hoped she'd find peace. Part of me didn't care. She'd been so easily fooled, so quick to replace Dad with Oliver. Maybe he'd seen that weakness in her from the start, picked our family to destroy because he knew he could. A year after everything, Dad got a settlement from the state for wrongful imprisonment. Not millions, but enough to pay off the house and put money away for my college. He bought a new truck, took a vacation to the mountains, and finally started living again. He kept working construction with Uncle Sebastian, though. I like the honesty of it. He told me one day, wiping sawdust off his hands. You either build something right, or you don't. No room for lies. I turned 15 that spring, and Dad threw me a big party, probably overcompensating for the birthdays he'd missed. Uncle Sebastian's family came. Elizabeth was there, and even some kids from school showed up. We had a bounce house, which was ridiculous for teenagers, but nobody complained. Dad grilled burgers, and for a few hours, we were just a normal family having a normal party, with him telling all those embarrassing stories about when I was little. That night, after everyone left, Dad and I cleaned up the yard in comfortable silence. Thank you for believing in me, Camila, he said, looking at me, for never giving up. I always knew you were innocent, Dad, I told him, my voice a little thick. You're not capable of hurting anyone. He hugged me tight. You saved my life, kiddo. We both cried a little then, but they were the good kind of tears, the healing kind. Life went on. I made the honor roll and even started dating a really nice guy named Rory from my chemistry class. When Rory came over the first time, Dad threatened to clean his shotgun, but he was mostly joking. After a year, Elizabeth moved in, bringing her cat, Mr. Whiskers, who immediately claimed Dad's favorite chair. We became this weird, little family, built on shared trauma but held together by choice and love. 2 years later, Oliver died in prison. Heart attack, the letter said. He was 43. I felt absolutely nothing when I read it. I just closed the letter and went back to my homework. Dad asked if I was okay. Yeah, I said genuinely. I really am. Oliver had been dead to me since the day they sentenced him. His actual death was just paperwork, nothing more. Mom sent a card for my 18th birthday. It just said, "Love, Mom," with no return address. I kept it for some reason, tucked in my desk drawer with other things I couldn't quite throw away. Dad said maybe someday I'd want to find her, make peace. Maybe he was right. Or maybe some bridges were meant to stay burned. Tom would tell. I got into college on a full scholarship, planning to study criminal justice. Maybe I'd become a lawyer, help other families torn apart by lies. Dad cried at graduation, completely embarrassing me in front of everyone. Elizabeth took a million pictures while Uncle Sebastian's family cheered from the bleachers. My chosen family, the one that stood by me when everything fell apart. The night before I left for college, Dad and I sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies. I'm so proud of you, Camila, he said, his voice soft. You've become an amazing young woman despite everything. I love you, Dad, I told him. You're the best dad anyone could ask for. We sat in comfortable silence. No need for more words. We'd survived the worst thing imaginable and came out stronger. That was enough. Looking back now, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found Dad's journal that night. If Oliver had succeeded in sending me away. If Mom had married him. If Dad had died in prison believing nobody cared. But I did find it. I did fight back. And sometimes that's all you can do. Fight for the truth and hope someone listens. In our case, they finally did. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.